And we'll go to Chris, who says, what exactly is going on with OpenAI? The turnover of high-level executives there seems pretty extraordinary. Mira Murati and two other high-level executives leaving at the same time, plus all the other ones that have quit in the last 12 months, plus the coup attempt. It's all very, very unusual. I mean, if OpenAI is getting closer to AGI and also about to turn into a for-profit with equity grants, why would Murati and company leave now? Sounds like a pretty dysfunctional organization. So yes, for anybody who hasn't heard, last week while Sam Altman was in Turin, Italy at Italian Tech Week, CTO of OpenAI, Mira Murati, shocked both the company and the tech world and tendered her resignation. And then on the same day, OpenAI's chief research officer and vice president of research also resigned. So in total, according to the Wall Street Journal, more than 20 OpenAI researchers and executives have quit this year, including several co-founders. Do you have any instincts as to what this could mean for their business or anything about this situation that's particularly interesting to you right now?
So, no, number one, who knows what's going on to a certain extent. Number two, in OpenAI's defense, this is like a 3,000 person company that's like a decade old. Like you might not realize that, or 8 years old or 9 years old. Mm-hmm. But there's a bit where, of course, people leave. It's very common for executives, particularly that were there at the early days, when you sort of cross a certain Rubicon in sort of size and revenue and all these sorts of things. There's lots of people that are just startup people, and they're just sort of like front end of a company's journey people, and then other folks take over. There's lots of examples of large public companies. They come to market, and they finally IPO, and like the CEO is the only one left. Like almost everyone that was there along the way has got off. And don't worry, Murati's fine. They've had plenty of tender offers for folks to sell their stock and sort of make lots of money along the way. And so there is an aspect of the story where the exceptional visibility of OpenAI and the fact it is like the number one obsession of the press and of the media for very good reasons probably magnifies some of this stuff to a larger extent, for some of which is normal.
Well, they also tweet their resignation letters and then the responses of people who stay at OpenAI. So yes,
we'll get don't worry.
Public scrutiny.
I'm starting out with the defense. We'll get to the other parts in a little bit. Number two is there is this real fundamental shift that's happened in OpenAI, which is the shift from OpenAI being a research organization to basically being a consumer tech company. We have these numbers that came out about all the revenue, and ChatGPT makes all this money. It is like a verb. And this is what I called for as soon, like within months of ChatGPT or maybe even weeks coming out. I'm like, they need to repivot. They have the opportunity of a lifetime, which is to be a consumer tech company, which is very, very rare. It doesn't come along very often. And that is not what a lot of the early people signed up for. They signed up for to be a research organization that is trying to achieve artificial general intelligence. And the reality is they're doing a lot of stuff to pivot to being a consumer tech company. And that is going to lose you executives that signed up to do one thing, particularly since they got super rich and accomplished a lot. And by the way, there's lots of other places to go work that are more in line with what they're doing, right? Ilya Sutskever leaves and starts this SSI, simple super intelligence, or whatever it is with Daniel Gross. They're very explicit. We're not releasing any products. We are just going for AGI. Anthropic, which by the way, that was sort of the upheaval before the upheaval. That's one of the original OpenAI upheavals, where a bunch of the top people at OpenAI left to found Anthropic. They're mostly making money on an API, which was going to be OpenAI's business model, and doing very, very well with it, right? They could go work there, right? So there's options in a way that there weren't when sort of OpenAI started. So, and then in addition, now, there's two very justifiable, understandable reasons why execs would say, I'm ready to go do something else. It's a different stage of life of the company, and the company's kind of going in a different direction than what I signed up for. And that's not to say that the direction's a wrong one. I think it is, by and large, the right one. They're doing this fundraising round where they're valued at, $150 billion?
Mm-hmm.
You could make the case that like 180 billion of that value is ChatGPT, the brand name. And like, because
Totally.
you could plug any model into ChatGPT and it's going to have that value. And all this drama is actually depressing the value of everything else. That's probably overstating it a bit. But the reality is that's what this company sort of is as far as a business, proposition is concerned.
Right. Well, and a lot of the conflicts do seem related to that fight over whether OpenAI is a research company or a consumer tech company. At least, I mean, the Wall Street Journal had an entertaining account of some of the tensions that have defined the past year or so at OpenAI, and a lot of it comes back to that. And so
That's right. And Sharp Tech listeners were early on this because we sort of identified this tension several years ago. That like, look,
right.
that was the chat. So here's the thing. Here's the analogy. I'm stealing this analogy from I was in San Francisco for the week. I just got a lot of thievery going on, so I'm going to add this on to my
It's
bird
not
plane
stealing
thievery.
as long as you give proper credit.
No,
so
this
hit
is
me with it.
No, I can't give proper credit, but this was a good one. OpenAI is the new Twitter.
Ooh.
And a few things. Twitter fell into this incredible product that was a total accident. They just suddenly got huge traction, and they had never resolved like what sort of company are we, who's in charge, all this sort of stuff. And you layered on this astronomical growth, and OpenAI, same thing. Like ChatGPT was an accident. That wasn't the goal. It was like a little demo app to throw out there. Everybody was floored at the extent to which it took off and became a thing. So all of this is just very sort of disruptive that's happening. Meanwhile, you have Twitter, super dysfunctional. You layer on astronomical growth that you don't have to really earn. It just sort of happens to you on top of dysfunction. You embed that dysfunction like permanently in the company's DNA. And Twitter is incredible. It is like a cockroach. It has the best network effect in the world. It can't change, it can't go away. Number two, its influence is so clearly just incredible, right? You can see how things shift in the culture broadly downstream from Twitter. And yet it is one of the most disappointing business outcomes in all of tech history. If you run the simulation 100 times of Twitter, and it's in like the bottom 10% of how it turns out. And this is not an Elon thing. This is before Elon. Yep. Like we were bagging on Snap last week. I wrote a post in like 2017, 2018 saying, I'm not covering Twitter's earnings anymore. This is a failed company. Like, I might talk about it from a societal impact perspective, but it's failed. It's a disaster. And nothing about that has changed. It's such a disappointing outcome, which is, and it's this combination of a perfect product that hit product market fit without the company sort of being solid around it. And then cultural dysfunction deeply embedded into that DNA. And you notice everyone on the scene at Twitter can change, and all the dysfunction remains. It's just like endemic to the company. And honestly, this may be the case with OpenAI. Now, this might be a Sam Altman problem. He might just be, again, we've talked about this. There's a perception among folks. He kind of talks out of both sides of his mouth. He says one thing. He wants you to think one thing. He's not technically lying, but then you realize it meant something else, sort of thing. Lots of stories about this. But I don't know. I haven't really dealt with him. I'm not going to speak to that, whether it's true or not. I'm just going to say I can envision a world where Sam Altman leaves tomorrow and OpenAI is still super dysfunctional and random executives are leaving all the time. And yet they're like successful because they what is Mark Zuckerberg apocryphally say about Twitter, which he denies saying at this point, by the way, but it's a clown car that fell into a gold mine. There's a bit about OpenAI that feels like that. And it may just always be like this. Twitter was the soap opera of all soap operas until Silicon Valley. And it was catnip for journalists. It was catnip for readers. And that just in many sense exacerbated the problem because you have an internal fight. What's your first instinct? Go talk to a journalist. There's going to be a big story about it, right? OpenAI
get ahead of the narrative.
That's exactly what OpenAI is today. And so is there some culpability with Sam Altman? Probably. Was the whole cool thing an issue? Yeah. This was a company founded on a lie, which was this whole nonprofit sort of thing that they're sort of, in some respects, at least they're getting more honest about things now. But, that's just what OpenAI is. And for better or worse, that is like their cultural sort of roots. And so, yeah, this isn't going to be the last drama, would be my guess.
Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, To the extent that turnover is a byproduct of getting clarity on the mission, then maybe it's healthy in the long run. But then on the other hand, you do need talent to build the consumer tech products and the models that you're pitching to businesses and developers and everything else. And it just seems like they've lost a lot of high profile talent over the last 12 months.
Yeah, it's hard for me to gauge that because every time someone leaves, you're like, oh my word, that sounds really important. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at Anthropic, right? Anthropic, I think most people feel that like Sonnet 3.5 is better than 4.0. And so there's a bit where it feels like they've taken the lead. And yet, and this is sort of the bit about the consumer tech company, it just doesn't matter to a certain extent, right? Like what are we actually sort of?
ChatGPT is still dominating in the consumer space. Is your point?
You could have ChatGPT, but the funny thing about this is the incentives are so much different. You could have ChatGPT, and one of your models could be Claude Sonnet, right?
Mhm.
Like it's a different, completely different sort of layer on the stack, and it's not what people at that company signed up to build, but it is what is really valuable about that company. It's why even despite all this drama, and there's definitely news about investors being nervous. I've heard Apple's nervous. Apple's now not going to be a part of this funding round. You know, Microsoft is doing everything they can to find sort of alternatives. It's, I would assume, still going to get funded, and that's because that they got something very, very valuable.
Yeah, the brand is really valuable. The one note that interested me is the New York Times got their hands on some documents that OpenAI has been circulating among potential investors. And apparently, OpenAI plans to aggressively raise the subscription price of ChatGPT to $44 a month within 5 years. And then they're projecting $100 billion in revenue by 2029. $44 a month for ChatGPT, while Meta is free, seems aggressive to me in this commoditized space. It's hard for me to imagine them being able to actually charge that effectively, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what the market turns into over the next several years.